Witiko is an evil cannibalistic spirit that can take over people's minds, leading to consumption as an end in itself, destructively turning our creative genius against our own humanity. Revealing the presence of Witiko in our modern world behind every form of destruction our species is carrying out. This mind virus is so embedded in our psyches that it is almost undetectable. And it is our blindness to it that gives Witiko its power. By recognizing this highly contagious mind parasite, we can break free and realize the vast creative powers of the human mind. Philosophers and spiritual traditions across the ages have been creatively symbolizing this deathly pathogen of the psyche so as to help us see it and heal it.
Witiko, Healing the Mind Virus That Plagues Our World, is quite simply the most important book written for a very long time. And it's brilliant beyond belief, and it's written by an authentic visionary genius. And it goes straight to the heart of understanding the forces, the dark and terrible and destructive forces that are now quite obviously erupting in what is quite obviously an apocalyptic situation. For years, I've been challenging the spiritual world to face this, and for years, I've been begging the major spiritual teachers to tell the truth to everyone about where we are, not to terrify us, but to prepare us, to alert us, to ask us to go through a much deeper transformation so that we can rise to the challenge of this apocalypse and birth a new world and a new culture in and through it. Because if you and I and the whole spiritual movement doesn't begin to face the power of the dark in our world, we will either be unconscious agents of it or we will be destroyed by it.
But all of a sudden, there was this incredibly dark energy that was in my field, that was in my life, and had come into my mind. So I had to wrestle with it 24/7 for decades. And more I began to alchemically transmute this incredible evil. And I began to understand, oh, wow, encoded, hidden within the Witiko spirit, because that is really the spirit of evil. But it's a quantum phenomenon that encoded within it is the medicine, is its own vaccine. Throughout the field, the non-local field, this is something that everybody is dealing with, but just in different ways, and whether they know it or not. And it's informing the events in our world. And, I began to realize, oh my God, the real medicine for this evil, this Witiko spirit, is to tap into being creative.
So what is this Witiko? What is this dark force? An overview from all of the mystical traditions, the really serious ones, about this dark force and its inescapable reality. But what is this dark force? What is Witiko? Why do we need to get really in touch with it right now in this situation that we're in?
Every spiritual tradition is talking about that the real light is to be found within the darkness. Witiko is teaching us something that we desperately need to know. But if we don't actually have the recognition of what it's showing us, then it's programmed to kill us. Witiko, it feeds off of fear.
You have to realize it. You have to identify it.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, because it only has power over us to the extent we don't see it.
Exactly.
Okay? And to the extent that we have this blindness to it, then it has us, because then it operates through our blind spots, and then we unwittingly become an instrument to act it out in our lives. Because once you see it, you take away its power over you, and you yourself become empowered. Because the thing about Witiko, the source of it and the solution is within us, is within the human psyche.
Absolutely. But one of the things that you've met is a great deal of opposition for this in the beginning, because the so-called New Age is catastrophically incapable of facing the shadow. In fact, denies that the shadow with its lethal potential exists. So what would you say to all of those who are still trapped in that fantasy?
Right. Well, I would point out that if you're turning away from the shadow, which is actually an avoidance of being in relationship to a part of yourself, that turning away, you're unwittingly feeding Witiko. Okay. But if you become too fascinated by it, then you're unwittingly feeding it too. But what I'm pointing out is to see how it works through the outside world and through your own unconscious, how we actually, through our reactions and through our unconscious, how we actually can become a vector for Witiko. When you see that, then you realize, oh, as a sovereign being, I get to choose where I place my attention, and I want to invest my attention in creating the world I want to live in. That's kryptonite to Witiko. Okay.
Well, it's very important at this moment, isn't it, to see Witiko, because it's erupting everywhere. We've just gone through COP26. We're living in a time in which American democracy is hanging by a burning thread, and in which the birth of American fascism, which could potentially begin the end of the planet very quickly, is not only possible, but even likely. And we're looking at a rise of authoritarianism all over the world. And we're looking at a very cruel, terrifying kind of capitalism, which is hobbling and destroying people. So we're living in Witiko world.
Yeah.
And we can identify it, but screwed.
Yeah, well, the thing is, no, absolutely. The thing about Witiko, it's a collective psychosis, and it's playing out. It's at the bottom of all of the collective madness that we're playing out, and all of the evil that we're playing out. But the thing is that you see, encoded in its manifestation it's like I was saying, it's actually offering us something, because Jung himself was totally turned on to Witiko, but he didn't have the name. He kept on calling it different names, but the main name he called it was totalitarian psychosis.
Right.
Okay, now the totalitarian psychosis, if you think about how Witiko works, it gets into our minds, and then it sets up like this shadow government. It colonizes the psyche. It dictates to the ego. It subsumes all the healthy parts of the psyche into its service. And the person so afflicted has no idea at all. They just, and meanwhile, they're unwittingly being this instrument to act out Witiko. Now, what I just described of that inner condition of somebody who has Witiko, you can see that Witiko is an inner disease of the soul that actually expresses itself via the medium of the outside world. So when you have the realization, the totalitarian forces that are playing out in the world and are insidiously creeping over our planet, that's actually reflecting what happens when a psyche is infected with Witiko. So the point is, when you see that, when you recognize the outer is reflecting the inner, that's to recognize the dreamlike nature. And that's to begin to wake up. So that's what I'm talking about, that encoded, it's a quantum phenomena, Witiko. Right. Encoded in the virus, it's actually helping us. But if we don't actually, recognize that, then it kills us. In the apocryphal text, they talk about the counterfeiting spirit. And the counterfeiting spirit, it's precisely a description of Witiko. So it impersonates us, say in this fictitious identity, I'm wounded, I'm limited. As soon as we identify with that, then it has us, because then, like a puppet on a string, we're under its control. It can, manipulate us all at once, but it can't touch the true part of us. When we're identified with the true nature, it can't touch us at all. So the point is, one way of really understanding Witiko, when we identify with that fictitious version, what have we done? We've given ourselves away, we've identified with who we're not, and we've disconnected from our creative agency. That's total madness, and that is Witiko. The point is that we, each one of us, 24/7, right now, we have this incredible creative power. But because we're unaware of it, we're unconscious of it, then just like a dream, when you're unconscious of something, it gets projected out and picked up by the dream. So then and the state is really, or whoever is really happy to own our own creative power and turn it against us. So that, in essence, is what Witiko does. And that's why the real medicine for it is to tap into our genius, our creative agency, our creative power. But if we don't know that, then Witiko will turn our creative energy against us in a way that's killing us. And when that's actually getting, playing out all over the world, then you see what's happening in the world, we're committing collective suicide.
As our essential identity, and that discovery releases all the other powers, doesn't it?
Yeah. And that's why, when people, when they hear about this mind virus or evil and all that, and I try to tell people, no, don't get afraid, because that's just feeding Witiko. But the idea being is that, you see, Witiko it's our ally. It's actually helping us. It's helping us to it's our ally. It's actually helping us. It's helping us to and I try to tell people, no, don't get afraid, because that's just feeding Witiko. But the idea being is that, you see, Witiko it's our ally. It's actually helping us. It's helping us to remember who we are and to connect with our Buddha nature. And it's actually catalyzing our species to evolve. That's what I meant when I was saying, if it didn't exist, we'd have to invent Witiko. It's actually our ally. It's forcing us to get in touch with who we are. It's forcing us to tap into our divine inheritance, to connect with our genuine power, to our genuine creativity. And what did it for me was incredible, over the top, this suffering, that all of a sudden, I won't go into the story, there was just this incredible suffering that came my way, and it stopped me from living my life. And, it could have really screwed me up. And I went deeply inwards, trying to understand what was going on and what was the source of that suffering. And I'm still a work in progress. It's not like, I'm this enlightened person. No, I'm just an ordinary person. But it was the suffering, and just more and more, just being present with it and embracing it and trying to understand what was going on. And because what it was like there was some sort of evil force. You see, the thing about our species, it's not just that we're asleep. It's as if there's some sort of darker power that's invested in keeping us asleep. And that was my subjective experience. And I was tripping out over that, going, what is happening? This is so unbelievable. And so I just committed my life to trying to heal myself, basically. And I'm still a work in progress, like I was saying. But as a result of doing that, I more and more began to discover, the thing is, in a fairy tale, when you find the name of a demon, you take away its power.
Your experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. Spiritual practice and a creative practice.
Yes.
And the idea of hearing your call, really connecting with your calling and finding your, being able to, the inner voice and the outer voice, really being able to creatively express yourself. Because the thing is, what I began to understand over decades was that, oh, well, there's a part in me that you could call it the higher self or wisdom or something. And we all have that. And all of a sudden, I was in such deep trouble with overwhelming suffering that, every night I'd go to sleep and I'd have these dreams, these unbelievable dreams, night after night after night for a number of years. And I began to understand, I was cultivating, it was like having a relationship, an intimate relationship with the unconscious. And it was teaching me and it was showing me. And the idea is that's something that each one of us can do. And you see, and that's what Witiko, it's actually helping us to do that. It's forcing us to do that. And, just to say right now at the time in history we're at as a species, if we don't really, just, and it starts with the individual. It's not, you can create new laws or legislation. That's important, but that doesn't really do it. The point is, any one of us, when we actually, whether you call it see our shadow or wake up to the dream or understand the quantum nature or Buddha nature or see Witiko, it's all just different words for describing the thing, the same thing. That actually has a non-local effect on the field. It makes it easier for all the rest of us because we're not separate. Do you see the thing about Witiko? It's actually helping us to see through the separate self. That we don't exist as an isolated, skin-encapsulated ego, but we're interdependent and interconnected with each other. And when you begin to realize that, the expression is compassion. And that's the Witiko dissolver par excellence.
Compassion and service.